Now, we have one last session for today, and they're from our friends at Apta. We have our Senior Director for the Office of Safety, Brian Alberts, and Senior Director of Security, Risk, and Emergency Management, Polly Hanson. And they're going to provide us with an update on Apta's upcoming events, initiatives, and services available to public transportation industry. And with that, attendees, let's give them a really big virtual welcome. And Brian, Polly, I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Roderick. So I'm Brian Alberts. I'm our Senior Director of Safety and Advisory Services at Apta, and my close colleague, Polly Hanson, will talk about security and emergency management related stuff that we're working on after I talk about safety related issues. So I don't see the slides yet, so I'll wait just a second. Okay, now I see. Yep, so great. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the slide to introduce ourselves. And like I said, Polly will take over the reins in about 10 minutes and give you a background on herself. But I am our Senior Director of Safety and Advisory Services, been at Apta for about 4.5 years. Prior to Apta, I was with the Federal Transit Administration and worked on many of the rules and regulations that Paulina and others talked about earlier today, including PTAS and the SSO final rule. So moving on to the next slide. Next slide. So one of the major things we work on at Apta, and many of you know, is we're very involved in our conferences, meetings, and workshops. So this fall, we have two really big upcoming conferences that we're planning and working on right now. So the one that's just around the corner in less than a month is our Apta Transform Conference at Expo. That's taking place November 7th through 10th in Orlando, Florida. And we have sessions, the FTA, Gail Lissy, who leads up the FTA Safety Office, is going to be speaking on a panel with a few other transit agencies about hot topics in safety and safety-related initiatives. We also have some learning zones taking place. One is on safety-related technologies, another is on cleaning and disinfecting. And we've actually, during the pandemic, we wrote the preeminent document on cleaning and disinfecting vehicles and facilities. So we're going to be talking about that, as well as some business members are also going to present their products. And then one of the other major things we're doing at the Transform Apta Expo is the Safety and Security Awards. So we had some really wonderful projects this year. We added in COVID-19 as a category, and I actually have a slide to talk about that. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. We also decided recently that we rescheduled our mid-year safety and risk management seminars to December 15th through 16th. In a virtual format. So many of the sessions we originally going to hold in Philadelphia that we now are moving to December in a virtual format we're still holding. So we're going to have a key address from the NTSB chair, Jennifer Homendy. We're going to talk about cybersecurity, which is a great segue from what we were just talking about with the CISA folks. We're also going to have a session on safety and security certification, PTAS, the bus and rail collision avoidance, and then operator assaults. So there's many other sessions, but those are a high-level overview of some of them. Next slide, please. One of the other things I wanted to highlight real quick is we have our monthly safety spotlight webinars. So we hold these on the third Thursday of every month. The next one is taking place on Thursday, October 21st, so in 2 days, from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. That link right there is the new link you can use to register for these, and you can add it to your Outlook calendar. So what we do on these is we have basically a sort of a committee meeting for an hour, and we talk about hot topics in the industry. A lot of the focus, as you would expect for the last 18 months or so, has been COVID-19. But we've also talked about safety certification, SMS, and other hot topics. And we usually have at least one guest speaker from either the FTA, FRA, OLI, NTSB, or others. So this month we actually have an FTA speaker, which will be great. Next slide, please. So 3 of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of standards that we've been working on this last year and a half or so. The first one, and I mentioned it earlier, is the cleaning and disinfecting white paper. So this is a document that a working group put together, both of business members and small, medium, and large size transit agencies, and determined what are the major things you need to do to clean and disinfect your system. and how often should you be cleaning and disinfecting, and which products should you be using. So we just went through an update of the white paper, and the CDC and EPA recent guidance are reflected in there, and that should be posted anytime now by the end of the month of October. We also have been working on 2 recommended practices that are really important in the industry. One more on the rail side, which is the safety and security certification. So a working group has come together to talk about the FTA handbook and what can be added in conjunction with it, to talk about some of the major methods that people are using nowadays to build their large projects and what should be looked at in terms of safety and security certification. And then the other one is the bus operator safety training. So this is a really important document to look at, how often should a bus driver be behind the cab, behind the wheel, versus how often should they be in the classroom and things like that. So it goes through all the different training mechanisms and really delves deep into training in terms of safety for bus operators. So look for both of those hopefully coming out at some point in 2022. Next slide, please. And I already mentioned this, but we have our Safety, Security, and COVID-19 Awards program. So this is an annual thing that we do, but we were really proud this year. We were able to recognize the efforts of the transit industry in terms of COVID-19. We know that COVID-19 has affected everyone substantially, and it's been the biggest thing, of course, in the last 2 years in the transit industry. So we wanted to make sure that our members, and many of you on this webinar right now, were really lauded for your efforts in terms of this area. So people applied back in January, February, March timeframe, and then in the springtime we closed the application process, and in the summer we met with our working groups and our folks on our panels to determine who the winners would be. So these will all be presented at Apta's Transform Conference and Expo at our awards breakfast on Tuesday, the 9th of November. So we're really excited. Every agency that won a gold award put together a really wonderful 1-minute video. So for those of you attending the Expo conference, we highly suggest that you attend both the award ceremony as well as the session that we put together afterward that'll be playing the videos. And for those of you that are interested in applying for next year's awards program, well, that will open in January 2022. Next slide, please. So quickly, I wanted to talk about 2 side programs that I manage at Apta. One of them is the peer review program. So this is conducted with subject matter experts throughout the public transportation industry. What we do is we send a group of anywhere from 2 to 4 individuals out to a transit agency. We talk to senior management about the issue at hand, and we usually spend about a week on site looking at the major issues. And then we produce both a final report as well as a briefing out to management at the end. We have conducted over 25 peer reviews from 2019 to 2021. So they're very popular. And they not only are in safety and security, but they're also in such issues as operations, maintenance, HR, customer service, and other things that take place at a transit agency. During the pandemic, we did many of our peer reviews virtually, so behind the computer, but we're just starting to get back into doing them at actual transit agencies and sending teams out to do them. So if you'd like to schedule a peer review, if there's an issue at your agency that you think is something that a group of industry experts could come out and look at, please go to that link that we have up there, and you can schedule an Apta peer review. Next slide, please. So similar to the peer review program, we also lead a safety audit program. So we've updated the bus and rail safety audit program to have safety management systems as the base criteria. This is reflected from the Federal Transit Administration, and I know this is a big part of our discussions at the SSO workshop here as well. So we really tried to make sure everything that's in the PTAS final rule is actually reflected in our checklists in our safety audit program as well. So through this program, agencies learn how to implement SMS, meet Apta industry standards, and as well as prepare for SSO and FTA audits. There's over 20 transit agencies in the program, including bus, rail, and commuter rail. And to sign up for a safety audit, I also have that link right there. And I think you guys everyone at this workshop, I think gets access to these slides afterward as well. So you'll be able to go to those links. Next slide, please. And then this final slide that I prepared here is on collaboration with outside groups. So Polly and I do a lot of collaboration with related transit, safety and security related groups in our industry. So the first group that we do quite a bit of work with is Cutter, which is at the University of South Florida. I'm on a transit safety standards working group along with Mariana, and we're actually meeting all next week at BART headquarters in Oakland to go over safety standards. In terms of Operation Lifesaver, Polly's on Operation Lifesaver's board, and then I've also worked with them on multiple grant reviews, and I know many of you have actually received grants from OLI, so I've been on panels to actually review those grant applications. And then we also, of course, support Rail Safety Week, which took place a few weeks ago, and that was very successful as well. In terms of FTA, we're, of course, like this forum, we've spoken on many FTA panels and, of course, invite FTA to speak on our panels as too. So we have FTA speaking at their Expo and then our mid-year safety seminar. And then we also know the RFI, or request for information, came out on safety concerns through FTA. So we got a group of folks together to reply to that. And then we're doing the same thing for the RFI on RWP and transit worker assaults. And then Polly's also working with FTA on the recent security initiative. And I have FTA speak on our monthly safety spotlight webinars. In terms of FRA, similar, we've had FRA on multiple panels. We did some work on Part 270 rollout. And then Nariana in my groups also sits on the RSAC part of FRA. And then finally with NTSB, we are having, as I mentioned before, Chair Hamidi speaking on the mid-year safety seminar. I was actually on a panel with folks for a roundtable discussion with NTSB about a week ago. And then we also replied to some recommendations from NTSB too. So the point being in all this is that we have a lot of collaboration with similar groups, and we try to work with our partners as much as possible. So ending on that, I will hand it over to Polly now to talk about security and emergency management. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And so where Brian said he came from the regulator, I come from industry. So I come from security at both WMATA in DC and Amtrak. And so if I can have the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about security and emergency management. Next slide, please. So security standards. Security standards are recommended practices that are developed through a very collaborative process that involves transit stakeholders, federal government partners, academics, security experts, business partners, and they're designed to protect mass transit and passenger rail. And we're really an outgrowth of September 11th and the creation of TSA. So Apta has 4 security working groups that really look at a wide range of topics. IT and OT, cybersecurity, emergency management procedures, infrastructure recommendations from fencing to lighting to random searching. We did, like Brian did, a white paper on disinfecting. We did a restoration and recovery from the pandemic checklist that didn't exist. And so to be involved in an Apta working group, you don't have to be an Apta member. And we would love to have anybody here participate because there are hundreds of them. They're used regularly by agencies who are looking for sources of information for security and emergency management concerns. And we have a prolific group of folks. So next slide. So if you'd like to be involved in the development of Apta standards, here's my email address, and I'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please. So this is a topic that you've heard about on the news, and it's not different in transit policing. So Brian mentioned peer reviews. I did several this year where people really wanted to re-examine their public safety initiatives. So in addition to the peer reviews, we've held educational seminars, webinars, workshops. We had a town hall meeting after the death of George Floyd to look at the safety and security of employees, passengers, new approaches to the response of the unsheltered or people experiencing mental health and addiction issues, new approaches that involve partnerships with local social service agencies, to provide housing, clothing, food, healthcare assistance, the deployment of transit ambassadors, mental health clinicians, crisis interventionists, and looking at fair education and engagement. And in fact, I'm going to host a session like this at our Transform conference. Next slide, please. I did reference mental health issue for transit for passengers, and I'm going to talk about mental health issues for transit workers, actually. Apta partnered with the Amalgamated Transit Unit to develop a research project statement for submission to the Transportation Research Board, Transit Cooperative Programs, to really look at the mental health of transit employees that I think we've come to recognize has really been strained during the pandemic. But earlier in these presentations today, we heard about operator assaults and some of the things that transit workers witness. So that it was submitted, it was accepted, the contractor selection process has been begun, and the project will result in a development of a toolbox for agencies to support the mental health needs of their employees. And we're very excited afterwards to be a part of that and other TCRP projects. We had submitted one about fare evasion, and that project is finished, and that product should come out. There's a case study of the way that fare enforcement or education is done across the country. And to align back to the reimagining public safety, there's a real alignment there of what will be in the TCRP project on fare evasion and fare education, and the efforts that many want to put into place to reimagine their public safety programs. Next slide. So Brian did mention Transform, and usually before an Apta conference, and this year, before Transform, Apta, along with TSA, hosts a security and emergency management roundtable. So we bring together emergency managers, transit, police chiefs, local law enforcement that support transit agencies, the security directors, our federal partners, FTA, FEMA, to look at the hot topics in transit security and emergency management. And so this year it will be November 6th and 7th in Orlando, Florida. And we're going to look at the impact of the death of Mr. Floyd on security efforts and transit policing. We're going to get a presentation on the active shooter that occurred at BTA. We're going to look at the preparedness planning for the Olympics in LA. We'll look at emerging technology, and then once again, we will get a briefing from our FTA and FEMA partners. Next slide, please. I mentioned active shooter. Apta has put together, I've assembled a group of agencies, transit agencies from across the nation. We have a working group, and we're looking to develop best practices for training transit employees on active shooter indicators and response. And we'll work that through the Apta standards process, and then that will be up on our website as a recommended practice. Next slide, please. We had Ben and company from CISA. Certainly a focus of mine has been cybersecurity. I referenced that we have 2 security standards working groups that focus on that, one from the IT, one from the OT side. We've also had educational seminars, webinars. We created an e-learning course for executives that this month, if you are an executive or a business member or a transit board member, you can take for free, and should have gotten an email from Apta encouraging you to do so, because October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We disseminated tremendous amount of information. I manage the PT ISAC for TSA, and there's a regular cybersecurity product that comes out there every day. And if anybody was interested in getting on the distro list for that, you can email me. And we're going to have a webinar tomorrow, actually, with CISA and TSA to talk about the CISA resources that you just heard about, and the impending security directive that was also referenced today. Next slide, please. Human trafficking awareness and training, something very, very important to FTA. Apta supports human trafficking awareness with a resource section on our website. We have many of the best practices that agencies demonstrate, and that's updated periodically by one of our interns. I've also done a variety of educational sessions. In January, I did one with Beyond the Lookout, and we actually had 3 survivors, really gut-wrenching stories. And FTA certainly talked about the DOT and FTA pledge and human trafficking awareness and public safety initiative. Next slide, please. Brian referenced our commitment to rail safety. I am on Operation Lifesaver Board, as Brian referenced, and then he sits on the panel that reviews the grant applications that are supported by FTA and FRA. And then we're really big promoters of Rail Safety Week. And I think that just demonstrates our strong commitment to safety and the prevention of trespasser and vehicle strikes. Next slide, please. A lot of my outside engagement is with CISA and TSA. I'm the vice chair of the Surface Transportation Security Advisory Committee that was created out of the TSA Modernization Act. Reports to the TSA administrator on surface transportation security matters. FTA is represented as a non-voting member. The group meets regularly and has over 20 recommendations that were approved by the administrator and when the process through our subcommittees, really developing plans to get to those outcomes of those recommendations. Some of them have to do with cybersecurity, insider threat. There was a really strong resilience post-pandemic piece that was put together in a toolbox that TSA has disseminated. Apta is also represented on the cross-sector council that CISA has. And of course, through that, we helped develop the language on essential employees. And we also advocated for the prioritization of the vaccine of transit workers. And so through the representation on many of these councils or committees for mass transit and passenger rail, we provide feedback on a variety of issues, and most recently on TSA security directives on the mask mandate and the cybersecurity initiative. So I think this is the end of my presentation. So go to the next slide. Because Brian and I really want to take, well, so hey, doctor, he just woke up, man. He's like, okay, here we come. We're into the question and answer period here, because we really would like to hear from you. And once again, thank you for letting Brian and I just briefly go over the things that we do at Apta for safety, security, and emergency management. So doctor, are we turning it over to you? No, okay. We're standing by for questions and we haven't received any yet. So come on, folks, don't be shy. Our feelings are going to be hurt if nobody asks us anything. I heard the conversation about barbecue, earlier. I'm from DC, so whatever it is, I'd have to have mambo sauce on mine because I actually am from DC. But Brian, we're not going to get into that conversation about barbecue that they were having. I just like it. I just know that. So,
right, and it seems that we're still waiting on some questions to roll in.
I guess, Brian, we just did such a comprehensive overview of
Exactly.
Apta initiatives. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was very thorough. So I know I learned of some new things coming up as well.
And, once again, I think we'd like to plug our standards. You don't have to be an Apta member. Love to have the collaboration with anybody. And the standards are posted on our website for public comment. So even if you don't want to be a member of a working group, you still have an ability to weigh in on the development of Apta standards, not just for security, emergency management, or safety initiatives, but across the board for any of them that we do on bus and rail.
All right. It seems that there are no questions. And I believe we're double checking, but there are no questions at this time. Okay, we have a question about to come through. One moment. Okay. Are Apta safety audits based on any published guidance or checklists that can be viewed?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So yes, we based him, like I said before, we based him off of SMS, off of safety management systems. We based it off of the PTASP rule. So we want to make sure that when you're getting your FTA-based or triennial-based audit, that a lot of the same questions are asked in our safety audits as in the FTA audits as well. So if you reach out to me individually, I think my contact information was there at bl@apta.com. I can probably send you some redacted and information that you could probably have on our safety audit program to be able to see some of the checklist information. So I would suggest that you reach out to me personally, and I'll be able to potentially send that to you.
And if I could answer the question about the peer review, and I know Brian will as well, but somebody has asked, thank you for the peer reviews and what type of feedback you receive from an agency after a peer review. And I can only talk about the ones that are public, but Cap Metro in Fort Worth, Texas has going to create their own transit police as part of their public safety program. And so that's just a tremendous effort and hasn't been done in some time. And so that agency, the CEO is Randy Clark, where Brian and I used to work for him, was very, very appreciative because the document on how to do that did not exist. And it's a tremendous amount of work when you do something like that, because we had to do community engagement with board members and all sorts of different components of the community. It's a very, very important and heartwarming for the panelists. And we all viewed in when they had their board meeting and listened in to the feedback. And so we do get thanks and kudos from general managers, and then some questions, because sometimes, you're making recommendations that, people ask you to come when they have a challenge. And so sometimes, and folks know that, if they have oversight or audit capabilities, sometimes you're suggesting that people stretch or do things that are challenging, and you get that kind of feedback too.
All right, thank you. We have another question. They all just started rolling in.
Yeah.
The next question is about when can we expect to see the Apta guidance on the safety and security certification?
So we're getting close to the end on that one. I think we have about maybe 2 to 3 more sections, and we're writing each section per month. So I would expect that to hopefully go to the balloting. Kevin Jones and I are, leading up that group effort. So hopefully that will go to the next step in the balloting process in early 2022. Apta does have a pretty comprehensive balloting process where they have to have it go through approval from CEO's committee and standards policy committees and things like that. So hopefully by, I would say, mid 2022, that'll be out, if not a little earlier.
Well, and the cyber component is going to be added. So after Brian's group's done, then the cyber folks are going to look at it, because we recognize that that's a huge component of anything that you're going to certify.
Right. Thank you for that. We have another question. As part of the Apta program to help RTAs with PTASP implementation, what are some common challenges?
So some of the things I've heard in the industry is the resource issues. So, the FTA put out this requirement for SMS and PTASP, and just agencies did not have necessarily all the resources to implement, but they're definitely working on it now. So, the thing that I was very proud of was that, they hit 100% of the compliance earlier this year for the PTASP, which is great. So basically everybody is complied now with the PTASP. But I think the major issue now is actual implementation of PTASP and implementation of SMS, because it's one thing to actually draft your PTASP, it's another to actually implement it at your agency. And so I think agencies are going through that process now of actually putting in place SMS, and that's not a quick process. That can take years in some circumstances. So I think that's just a challenge, but I think everybody is working really hard to get there.
All right.
Hey, Doc, can I speak to the one about since 673 replaced 659, age and safety plan regulation, and it no longer requires an SEQP How should RTAs and SSOs review system security through SOPs and policies? Of course, Apta has a standard on that. That's been revised because of the change. And of course, FEMA, if you want to get a transit security grant, you got to have a plan. And just because you don't have to have a plan doesn't mean you shouldn't have a plan. And so, of course, you know, an SSO can still have that requirement. So SOPs and policies are okay, but they need to be assembled like they would be in an SEPP. And once again, if you have a base by TSA, they're going to want to review that. So agencies should still have a security plan, irrespective of what the safety plan regulation says.
All right. And we have one final question. And this may have been answered a moment ago, but what are the biggest challenges or opportunities you anticipate transit departments facing in the next 4 to 5 years? And I know, Brian, you touched on the implementation aspect of PTAS, but are there any other questions?
So I'll talk, and then Polly, you can add in too. So with the FTA's RFI on transit safety concerns, some of the major things that we talked about in that, which I think are the things in the safety realm and security realm that we're going to be dealing with. So transit worker assaults is a huge one, obviously. Hours of service policies, they have hours of service policies on the FRA side, but not on the FTA side. So that's an issue, and that's a unionized thing that we're going to be dealing with as well. And then RWP we talked about. So luckily, and we're happy that FTAs move forward with this new RFI on roadway worker protection and on transit worker assaults, because we think those are two of the major things in our industry that we're going to be having to deal with for the next few years. So there's lots of other things as well, but I would say those are some of the major ones.
I think emerging technology, certainly we heard from the cyber fellas, and as people go to autonomous vehicles and other new technology, having practitioners who are well versed on that so they can develop the guidance for safety and security certifications, or just even to investigate an incident. You know, when Las Vegas first put out their autonomous vehicle, the FedEx truck ran into it and people showed up and really didn't even know how to investigate a vehicle accident when you don't have an operator. So I think that the emerging technology, we know that electric buses will cause, guys that used to, kind of be lug nut folks, they're really going to be electricians. And so, we'll have to evolve, and safety will have to evolve as we have new and emerging technology.
All right. Thank you. Very, very comprehensive answers. And I know the industry is looking forward to all the guidance updates that Apta is going to provide. So thank you, Brian and Polly. It was a pleasure to hear from you. And this concludes day one of our workshop. And attendees, we hope you found today's presentations informative, and we're excited for more tomorrow. However, I just want to give you a couple of pieces of information. So in a moment, we're going to ask that you complete our end of day survey. And there are a few different questions. So please hang out for that in just a moment. We're going to display the poll. But after we complete this poll, please take part in our virtual knowledge exchange, which is going to run until 5:30. Or I'm sorry, no, it's going to run until 5. And initially, there's going to be 4 breakout rooms that you may choose from. One of the popular ones we anticipate is developing an effective safety culture. But what we're going to do is drop the link to how to join those sessions in just a moment. So if we can have the poll displayed for our end of day questions. All right, so question number 1. For those of you who may have not been here earlier, you want to click the polls button on the right-hand side of your screen. So which session was most helpful to support your job responsibilities from day 1? Transit Safety Policy and Guidance Update, the Transportation Security Administration Surface Updates, Cybersecurity, Cyber Threats in the Transit Industry, or American Public Transportation Association's Updates, or APTA's Updates. So please make your selection. All right, and if we could please move to the next poll or the next question. Are you planning on attending this afternoon's virtual knowledge exchange session? Yes, no, or for part of it? All right, and to that point, it looks like we hit both of those questions. So let's get our attendees ready to join those knowledge exchange workshop or breakout rooms. We'll be dropping a link in the chat, or you may also go into the initial login page when you logged in for the conference and look for the knowledge exchange link along the top of the page. And then you can choose which room you would like to join. And you can feel free to jump around to different rooms as well. All right, it looks like the link has been dropped. Once again, you may use this link, or you may choose to visit the landing page when you sign in to attend the conference, and you will find a button that says Knowledge Exchange. Thank you for your time, everyone, and I look forward to kicking this off in the morning for another exciting day.